My name is Chris Carter, and it's great to be here in 2012. And I am with MeYou Health, a social well-being company, and I'll describe what that is. We're probably the first ever social well-being company. And I'm here today to talk about the intersection of a couple of trends, social network science, capacity, and sort of gamified everything these days, and how that has affected our work in the healthcare space. There's been lots of, decades of change here that's been rather breathtaking as I look back at my own work in this space since the mid-'80s. And over the past 15, 20 years, we've really been focused on building health applications and looking at this environment and trying to understand what do we hold on to, what do we design around, how do we engage people long enough in healthy behaviors in order to have some kind of measurable effect, and how do we measure that effect? And so in the process of trying to get at some of those questions, I thought I would run down a brief history of social interaction online, how we're thinking about social interaction, some of the gamification stuff that we think is interesting and useful. This idea of small daily actions, which is a small idea that we are pivoting around through most of our products, and really look at how we've applied that work and some of our own design thinking, and look at some of the ways that we're expressing it, and look at some of the data that we're finding. So let me launch into this, and feel free to interrupt if you have a question or something you want to talk about. But this is who we are. This is who we have come to understand who we are. We're a social well-being company. We focus on building web and mobile applications that transform social networks into support systems to improve people's well-being. And I'll be breaking this down as we go forward here. We're based here in Boston. We've got really nice offices in the South End. We are a wholly owned subsidiary of Healthways, which is a publicly traded health services company based in Nashville, Tennessee, that I ended up there through the acquisition of my company, QuitNet. We've been around now for 2 years. We have hired about 17 people, have a couple of dozen contractors with whom we work on a regular basis. We put together kind of a innovation team within a public company, and this is really an exercise in no small part in how do you innovate inside a big company. Healthways is not huge, but several thousand employees, and we pulled together a multidisciplinary team of these kinds of folks, and created more of an entrepreneurial unit that has really been really exciting for me to work with, even though I'm about 20 years older than everybody else on the board here. So let me go back first before I talk about the present day. The Wayback Machine is a great way to kind of look back in time at the history of kind of social interaction online. Some of you, I don't remember this one, but some of you may. Very early initiative around social interaction online. This connected to a mainframe unit. But nevertheless, these kernels of ideas about how to mediate social interaction have been around for a long time. CompuServe, of course, in the mid-'80s, which is kind of when I started waking up to this. That's what this looked like, in those years. CompuServe turned it into the biggest consumer information service, and years before the internet became publicly available. Since disappeared, of course. And then these guys, if you were around in the early, mid-'90s, your mailbox was probably littered with these discs that would appear. AOL successfully dressed up the interface so that the mainstream could use it. And then they kind of drilled a hole in their private network. It's a little fuzzy here, but the internet was available through a very kind of like narrow hole, prescribed websites and gopher sites and what have you. And for many years, a lot of people thought the internet was AOL. The Globe, started by some undergrads at Cornell, one of the first real serious efforts on the web to create a social interaction environment. What features would people use? How do you manage interactions like this? If I recall, they went public in 1998, had the biggest sort of stock movement in history on the price, and then quickly went out of business. And then QuitNet. This was a project that was started by Nate Cobb, who's somebody I've continued to work with all these years. Nate was a smoking cessation counselor in the North End of Boston and a computer programmer for health risk assessments by day. And Nate tried to solve one problem. Nobody came to his clinic on Thursday night, and he thought, again, this is 1994-95, that the web would turn out to be a way for people to support each other who wanted to quit smoking. How do you find other people who want to quit? How can you quit anonymously? He built this prototype, showed it to me when I was at BU, and I hired him to do other things, and this was his baby, and it quickly grew into the largest smoking cessation program in the world, and continues today to be a very successful commercial program. So a survivor from this era, 1995. So there's a long history of these things over the span of time. This is kind of a chronological look at some of this. Lots of companies you may have heard of, most of them non-existent at this point. And then when you get into the 2005, 2006 space, people started figuring out, namely, with the launch of Facebook in 2005, expanding to corporate networks in 2006, and then eventually to everybody later that year, and Twitter as well. And the rest is sort of the history that we're living now. But nevertheless, this is kind of the historical sort of overview that we're part of. And yet there's lots of stuff now that forces us to really rethink what the opportunities are to design, to redesign ways in which we engage people in behavior change activities. And Facebook is very much part of that, in no small part because they have grown dramatically. I don't need to sort of dwell on these numbers. I've stopped updating this chart. I just update the number up in the upper right. Much of the planet. Now, one of the big differences, just to call out here, is that most of the other networks that I just ran through in the history of social networking was really about... Okay, we're going to try something different. Can you still hear me? Okay, try that. Facebook is distinguishable for many reasons, but one of the things that's important to us is that these are real people with their real identities, for the most part. These are 800 million people who are identified through Facebook as their real selves and accountable to their own personal social networks. Really important difference that we are trying to leverage with our applications. This is not a map of the world. This is a map of the Facebook friend network that looks like a map of the world with some obvious differences. China doesn't exist in this world, but it begins to sort of paint this picture of this global network of people who are connected together. And indeed, the statistics are really staggering. No other internet application or mobile application has amassed this kind of interaction, where 50% of their members log in on any given day. That's 400 million people. Just astounding interaction statistics. And important to us as well as application developers is the Facebook platform that they have opened up that has spawned just extraordinary levels of innovation across most of the world, with millions of websites integrating with the Facebook platform. And some of what I'll show you today, I think will illustrate the potential power of how to leverage these technologies to build better applications. So the ubiquitous Facebook login button over on the right, much of the traffic of Facebook occurs, in a decentralized way. It's not in the Facebook frame. It's not in Facebook apps. It's in websites that are latching on to this infrastructure. So more and more people are logging into websites with one of these social identities, with Facebook being the main one, but each of these networks having particular characteristics of their own social graphs. So it's this aspect of Facebook that's most interesting to us as a social utility and an identity provider, because what we're really after is trying to not only interact with you as your real identity, but also interact with you in the context of your friend network. And for the first time, that's possible. So clearly, a changing environment that kind of confounds us as we design things. One of my favorite sources of information is the Pew Research Center, and I found this infographic a while ago. It does a good job of kind of a quick snapshot of where things are at these days. Mostly, still skewed towards the young, but very significantly, a quarter of social network users are over 50, and that's only going to grow. In the upper right here, most Facebook friends know each other. A really important aspect of this for us, something that we didn't have a handle on when we were building QuitNet 15 years ago. And surprisingly, most users of social networks actually have more close social ties than people who are not internet users. Another piece that's really important to us in the healthcare space, where trust is really critical, is that people are trusting of people they interact with online, much more so than non-internet users, according to this survey. So there's tremendous potential that we've arrived at over the last 20, 30 years in the history of social interaction online, for us to work with. Another key development for us as we have begun to dive into this is the work of Nicholas Christakis, MD researcher at Harvard. Many of you are probably familiar with his work. This book with his colleague James Fowler, Connected, paints a rather extraordinary picture of how we're all connected and how we influence each other. And they, of course, are famous for drawing these social maps where each person is a dot and their connection between each other is defined by these kinds of social graphs. And it's hit the major media, with titles like this, Your Friends Making You Fat, exploring these ideas of whether health behaviors are contagious and how we influence each other. One of the intersections for us, it was the work that Nicholas and his group did around happiness, which is kind of a close cousin to well-being, which is our core business, and I'll get into this in a minute. But to see it quantified in these terms is kind of surprising, that our friends and our friends' friends, and even a third degree removed, actually are people who have influence on us. That's a lot of people. So we looked at this research and asked ourselves, how is this at play in applications, and how do we capture some of this so that we can design applications and not only help an individual and change their behavior, but also begin to treat the network that people are in, like kind of local network. Some of the research that was published early on by Nicholas and his group was this piece on smoking cessation, which I latched onto when we were working on QuitNet. And these were all, there was a series of papers that were derived from the Framingham Heart Study, 30-year longitudinal study right here in our backyard. And it looked at real-world networks. And they went back and kind of reconstructed as best that they could the social relationships between real people in Framingham and looked at it from a number of perspectives, smoking cessation being one. And here on the left in 1971 is a large cluster of interconnected people. The yellow dots are smokers, and the size of those circles are represent the number of cigarettes per day. Fast forward to 2000, looking at the same network, most of the smokers are gone. And when they look at this just kind of through a time lapse animation, they began to see that entire clusters of smokers would kind of disappear almost all at once, over a short span of time. And they began digging through this and were able to quantify, as they've done with numbers of other health areas as well as others, just the level of influence that various kinds of relationships have. Again, we found this fascinating. I mean, if you could harness this in an intelligent web application, could you then drive effectiveness in new and more powerful ways? My friend Nate, the founder of QuitNet, has gone on to be a researcher himself. This is a published paper on the dynamics of the QuitNet smoking cessation support community. This is a large interconnected cluster of about 60,000, 70,000 QuitNet users. The red dots are users who are smokers, just entering the site. For the most part, the blue dots are people who say that report that they're abstinent, and then various kinds of social ties between them and the site. And this surprised us due to the level of kind of intermingling of the folks. The smokers were drawn into the community by the non-smokers. Nate went ahead and kept digging into the dynamics of the formation of this community. And this is like a 15-second loop here. So let me just quickly describe what's happening. The red dots in this case are new members. When the loop starts here in a second, the new members fall to the bottom. The blue dots are existing QuitNet members, and so there's the beginning of time here in this time slice. And this simply shows how the existing members in the site incorporate new members into a new kind of social cluster, enveloping smokers in kind of non-smoking clusters where non-smoking is normalized. And further research really showed that this kind of social interaction was critical to driving long-term behavior change.
Who's the big red smoker in the middle?
Well, this analysis also has become important to us in understanding who the kind of super users are. Who are the people who make it their business in this online community to draw these people in? It's not everybody. And those people are incredibly important in any online community, in any community. And now we have algorithms that can detect and identify these people on the fly, and we can provide different levels of service to them. So again, we're only scratching the surface, and I'll show you some additional ways that we're incorporating these kinds of ideas in designing social health applications, because we fundamentally believe that social piece is really critical, that long-term behavior change is essentially about forging effective social ties that sustain that change. Question?
Just really quick before you move on. Those original network discussions, some of them were not methodologically very good about identifying causality versus just associations. Can you clarify that a little bit?
I think you're referring to, there's a fair amount of controversy around Christakis' work, or has been over the past number of years, which they present as sort of a...
Friends unhappy, is it
Yes.
because
Right.
I hang out because I get rid of my unhappy friends, or because...
Well, I've heard Nicholas speak several times to this point, and far be it from me to defend their position, but there's a large body of evidence that kind of drills down and tries to demonstrate and quantify the way in which people actually influence others, that it's not just, I'm hanging out with other smokers, that people actually have influence over your behavior. The question for us is, how do we incorporate these ideas in a way that we can test them in real-world applications, or do we just leave them as research papers in medical journals, so that we can validate for ourselves whether or not incorporating some of these ideas helps us build smarter, better, more usable applications that people want to use. And so let me keep coming back to that question as we go here. The other big trend, and it's kind of just, you see this all over the place now, much discussion about how to apply game thinking, game mechanics to all kinds of applications. And a lot of this stuff was jet propelled, of course, by Facebook opening up its platform, companies like Zynga capitalizing on the tremendous sort of viral capacity to distribute applications. And I thought this was a sort of fun illustration that you may not really be thinking about, that most Facebook users do engage in social gameplay to kind of ridiculous levels. And most of these folks are women, and they tend to skew more towards 40 and 50-year-old women. There's a big business here, even though it's a very small percentage of people who pay. There's billions of dollars being made through the exchange of virtual goods, and a lot of time being spent. So we look at this and say, can we get a fraction of that time? Because as application developers and distributors, we have to compete with this. We're looking for a few minutes of somebody's time in order to engage them in some health behavior. We have to compete with this kind of, highly addictive behavior, and the way in which companies like Zynga and others are beginning to kind of define what it means to play a game. What are successful game mechanics? And they've gotten this down to an extraordinary science, where they're essentially running, hundreds of randomized controlled clinical trials, every day for each individual person. So it's a tremendously sort of quantitatively driven environment. Nobody operates on this scale, in the healthcare space, and we have a pretty well-funded but still fledgling effort to try to weave some of these things together. And you're starting to see gamification kinds of applications of all kinds. Khan Academy, learn how to do anything, points, stamps, what have you. Entertainment sites where you log in with your Facebook ID, leverage your social graph, get points and stamps, and everybody is doing it. It's happening in the healthcare space. Sites like this that are, unclear what their business models are, but launching everywhere. Lots of venture money. Track what you eat. Compete against your friends. Stay fit and enjoy food. It's just kind of this dizzying array. Kiosks is a major player, a very well-funded player in the wellness space, in the corporate wellness space. Did a complete 180-degree turn after an initial failed effort and kind of re-engineered their entire site and sales pitch around a gamified sort of wellness experience that they now sell into large corporations. But what is this stuff about? I am not a gamer, but I've hired a bunch of gamers, and it's been a real learning experience for me. And as we kind of distill this stuff down to bare sort of necessity here, a good game has to have these aspects to it. It has to let you explore an environment. Sense of achievement. A lot of people like to compete, but not everybody. And again, essentially this social experience, and hence the success of Zynga and others. But when we look at it in the healthcare space, we really think of health as more like a game. Most healthcare applications that are developed and sold into the employer market and health plan market really are this sort of heavy process stepwise program. 10 steps to quitting smoking, 5 steps to losing weight, where you progress in a linear fashion. We just don't think people change that way. Health behavior change really is more of a journey, where there's a fuzzier goal and a more circuitous path to getting there. So building this player journey and this immersive environment where people can explore is what we've been after. So let me switch gears and talk a bit about how we've kind of taken these ideas and begun to apply them to the dozen or so applications that we've designed and developed and brought to market in the past 2 years. So remember, we're this kind of funny new kind of company, a social well-being company, and we start here. Healthways, which started out as a disease management company and then bought a bunch of wellness companies, it's positioning itself as a well-being company. And there's a tremendous body of knowledge that is defining this well-being space. Healthways has partnered with Gallup for a 25-year strategic partnership to produce something called the Gallup-Healthways Well-Being Index, which is really rather a monumental effort, where there's 25,000 phone calls placed every night, 360 days a year, to complete 1,000 surveys of a representative sample of the U.S. population. So well over 1 million surveys over the last 3 or 4 years, building this body of knowledge, this definitional framework of well-being. And you can see the domains of well-being along the left here: life evaluation, emotional health, physical health, healthy behaviors, work environment, and basic access to food and shelter and what have you. And creating this index that tracks the changes of well-being over time. So we are connected to a company that has this massive growing database that, as it gets bigger and bigger, becomes statistically valid down to smaller and smaller locations, eventually down to the zip code, where we'll be able to identify the well-being of this neighborhood in Cambridge. So while there's all this data, we were still left asking ourselves this question: how do we communicate these ideas in a way that people will resonate with? Enter Essential Design. There's a couple of people here from Essential who helped us with this and did tremendous work here, helped us have conversations, one-on-one conversations with several dozen people where we, sat them down and talked to them about well-being, had them sort of do various drawings and exercises. And one of the things that we were left with was that well-being is a fundamentally powerful idea, but it's not something that people talk about much. But when you ask somebody about it, they begin to know. But typically, these are the kinds of things that are at the top of mind. So as we unpack this, as market research firms are so good at, we began to develop a segmented view of our audience, which helped us figure out how to design the applications that we've been bringing to market. And underneath each of these is a sort of rich array of information that began to help us understand the perspectives of various target markets that we were looking at, the way in which people are connected, the technologies that they interact with on a regular basis. And one of the lasting things for us were these kind of drawings that people drew, where we asked them to put yourself in the middle here and draw a picture of those people in your life that influence you and people that you influence. No big surprises here. People drew similar kinds of charts with their friends and family, usually co-workers and what have you. But one of the striking things here, and one of the disconnects with the healthcare industry that we're determined to work around, is that most health and wellness services sold to an employer for their employees is really, those services are really confined only to the colleagues that you interact with. Maybe your dependents, but your friends and other people in your real life who are influential and important to you are excluded from these applications. So we're designing applications that have an open kind of social architecture so that we can make sure for each individual we're letting them leverage the people in their real lives who are important in helping them change. We also identified 4 kind of core principles that are critical, in our view, to success. That anything that we do has to be realistic. We're giving people simple things, small things that can be done, convenient. The attention economy. It leaves us very little room for interacting with people. If behavior change takes a long time and a lot of engagement over time, what's a realistic expectation about how much time, how many days per week? So it's got to be convenient. Whatever we build has to deliver immediate results. Otherwise, people won't stay engaged. And very important in the healthcare space, it's got to be genuine. An application that's often sold through your employer, for example, where you're contributing data through a health risk assessment or similar kinds of data requests. You may wonder, well, where is this information going? Who's holding on to it? How can I trust the application developers? So this establishing a genuine connection based on trust is really a prerequisite for getting anything done in the healthcare space. We then went on to develop a brand, knowing that this was going to be critical in helping us sort of establish that right relationship between MeYou Health and our ultimate users. The brand really began to be expressed around these 3 main considerations. When we talk to people in the market research, there was usually a place when you talk about well-being with people where they get to this very kind of contemplative state and almost a Zen-like state where they realize how fundamental and personal and vulnerable they are when it comes to their well-being. So we knew that we had to kind of capture that. The social piece is obvious, and we really wanted to get people taking action. So we're designing fundamentally around this idea of small actions. Somebody mentioned earlier BJ Fogg. We believe in the kind of way in which BJ is starting to define this. This is all online. I urge you to take a look at it. There's a lot of complexity here, but just to simplify it for a minute, this has been really helpful for us as designers. This idea of dot, span, and path behaviors. A dot behavior is something you might do one time. A span is sort of stringing these things together over a span of time. And a path behavior is something that you successfully have baked into your life. And this is the question for us. Can we start with these dots and turn them into paths? This idea of making it tiny. Right down to these kind of absurd examples, but they make the point. If you're having trouble flossing your teeth, just start with one tooth. Floss one tooth tonight, and tomorrow night, maybe two. So this is our core design principle here. What would it take to get a few minutes of your time every day to do one small action designed to improve your well-being? And these are the examples of what daily challenges, which is the daily challenge is our core product. We've written now over 1,000 of these daily challenges. I'll show you this product in more detail here. So small daily actions. So that's sort of the how we have sort of looked at the environment, developed our own design principles, brand. We had the great luxury and funding to start from scratch. We didn't have a line of code. We had a name. We had no brand. We had the opportunity to kind of roll all these things up in a fairly rigorous way. And we've launched, well over a dozen applications, many of them experiments, and I just wanted to show you a few of them. Munch 5 a Day is an iPhone application, a really simple iPhone application. The recommended dosage of fruits and vegetables is 5 servings a day. So we're not big on trackers, but here's a tracker. This is as simple a tracker as you can get. You eat a dose of fruit or vegetable, you just tap on it, and it munches, the corner of the apple off. You set your goals, and it's as simple as that. So you launch the app, tap the fruit or vegetable symbol, and it tracks your consumption of fruits and vegetables. But the way that this thing actually works is right here. These are the three remaining servings I have left today. So every time I look at my phone, I realize, I got some more fruits and veggies to eat. Still, this idea, there are gazillions of trackers of all kinds. And as we enter a more connected world with devices, it remains to be seen whether anybody will use these things. Another kind of tracking device was another iPhone app that we developed called Monumental that leverages the accelerometer in the iPhone to detect stair climbing. So we built a game around this that, you pick a monument around the world, in this case the Eiffel Tower. You're at the bottom of a staircase, you hit go, you start climbing up, and as the steps you climb up the stairs, contribute to your climbing the Eiffel Tower, and this beautiful illustration gets revealed as you go up. It's social. You can climb Mount Olympus with a group of friends, and away you go. These things are really complicated. These are just some of the screens, just most of the screens in the application. Developing iPhone apps can be really expensive, marketing them even more expensive. So how realistic is it as a way of really breaking into the consumer market and having an impact on behavior change? We learned a lot. We've also built a whole number of Facebook applications that get launched inside Facebook and Facebook Connect applications. This is an application called Super Friends. You install it in Facebook, and it reads your social graph of your friends and creates the clusters of how your friends are connected to each other. Again, sort of playing with some of these ideas, and along the way we began to learn how to work with the Facebook API and its limitations and some of the power there. We have done a lot of work around kind of taking a new look at health risk assessments, which many of you have probably taken in the context of your own employer. Pretty onerous question and answer thing. We tried to turn that into a kind of Zen-like experience, and this is a Facebook application that walks people through a brief assessment that generates their well-being score. More on this later. Another application, you log into this with your Twitter account, and it leverages the Twitter social graph. Log in with your Twitter ID. You answer the 41 questions of the well-being tracker, which is, generates your well-being score, and then you tweet about it. Your followers then come, take the assessment, and we report back to you your followers' average well-being score, giving people who use Twitter some insight into their followers. If we have time at the end, I'll show you how Deepak Chopra adopted this site and utilization went off the roof. Let me walk through our core product, the Daily Challenge, and then we'll look at some statistics about utilization and what we're learning. This is a freely available application online, dailychallenge.com, if you want to take a look at it. This puts together all of these pieces: small daily actions, social support, sort of a light sort of game environment. You can log in with your Facebook ID or use an email address and a password. If you do use your Facebook ID, which we encourage, we get to leverage your friends list and other information. A lot of people don't want to do this, but we're already seeing through the research that we're doing that those people who log in with their Facebook ID are much more successful because it jumpstarts the social experience and the connections that are important to supporting change with your real friends. So we encourage people when they enter in to create a small circle of friends. Our research with Bill at Essential kind of indicated, our hypothesis was that maybe a dozen, if you connect with a dozen of your friends, in the context of doing some healthy thing, that you're going to find support there. So this is not about all 180 of your Facebook friends. This is about, what 10 or 12 people might you interact with in this context. We make it easy to invite people using this sort of standard Facebook interface. I don't know how many of you have done any development with the Facebook API. It's kind of a crazy, fast-paced world. They are always changing this stuff, and it's a challenge to keep up with, but I think well worth it. It gives us a vehicle to easily allow people to create networks of people that they care about. But the basic interaction model is really dead simple, and it's primarily driven off of email. Every morning at 7 a.m. we send out a daily challenge. This is an example. We tell you how to do it and why to do it. At the bottom of the email is some social proof of what your friends and the product did yesterday. If you don't respond by clicking on the done button by 4 p.m., you'll get a reminder with more social proof of your social connections who engage with the product today. Simple as that. We're trying to get you to click the done button. Once you do, you enter into the site where we explicitly encourage you to share how you did it. And with this, as I'll show you, has come a rather astonishing sort of percentage of people who actively share and participate in the community. And the connections to Facebook allows people to as many other applications do, post your success and failure back to Facebook, to your broader social network. There's leveling up and point accumulation as we help people celebrate their achievements. And in the lower right here, we are constantly presenting, what's going on with your friends, building this sort of dense cluster of social ties where you can track how other people are doing, what challenges they're working on, how they're completing them, etc. In the upper right here is this, what we call the well-being tracker, which is a validated scientific assessment derived from the bigger Gallup-Healthways well-being index, 41 questions that have been demonstrated to be predictive of an individual's well-being. It generates a score between 0 and 100. We've adapted it and incorporated it into this product and presented it as this tracking tool where we revisit these questions over time. We've made it really simple to take them. After you complete a challenge, we'll prompt you with a couple of questions to update your score and present your score in this way and track it over time. We bundle it up in an individualized report, breaking the score down by well-being domains, and again, helping people explore well-being. So if you go back to the kind of game design kind of mantra, exploration, achievement, competition, social interaction. A whole mobile experience, which has been another wake-up call for us. We have kind of rallied around a mobile web approach as opposed to native applications. Much easier for us to maintain a semblance of kind of feature parity between a full web experience and the mobile side. And a simple way to interact via text. Text messaging still being the most ubiquitous messaging technology on the planet, and tremendously powerful and demonstrated so by any number of clinical trials to be enormously effective in driving health-related behavior change. So that's the product. I think I have a few-minute animation, which I'm going to bypass here, given the time, and get to some of the stuff that we're learning. We get thousands of user feedbacks a day. And I pulled this one out because it kind of embodies a whole number of things that validated some of our original research and assumptions. I'm 50. We were aiming at the 40 to kind of 50-year-old market. And this person thought this was about dieting. Then they found out it was about much, much more. Exactly what we had discovered in the conversations we had with people. And who doesn't love a challenge? This idea that something simple that we ask people to do. You don't have to think about it. We're going to suggest something that you do today, and it's not going to take long. It's going to provide immediate results. And finally, I want to thank my cousin for her invitation. This person came to the site because a daily challenge user invited them, building the kind of social tie that's important to driving behavior. We send out a weekly email to people kind of summarizing activity that includes some of the statistics for the week at the bottom. So there's lots of activity going on here. Over the past 18 months or so that the product's been in existence, over 3.3 million challenges have been completed, and thousands of people sharing information every day. Just been delighted by the level of activity. I mentioned earlier, the level of conversation going on, and conversation is the key to social media, and really having a structured, explicit way to elicit these conversations is what has driven this metric. QuitNet was a pretty successful social interaction kind of environment, but only about 10% of the entire QuitNet sort of active monthly users actually posted anything. We consistently have over half of our active monthly users posting how they did it and responding to others. A really important number, important metric for us. We've got a lot of people tracking their well-being score, completing this assessment that in another context where you might not trust who's asking, you may not answer these 41 questions. People love to get their well-being score. We had no idea if that would have any traction, but people love getting their well-being score as a way of beginning to understand this deeply felt idea that has that few people can really articulate. And it's also giving us, I might add, a clear pathway towards efficacy measurement, and I'll talk about that shortly. Social engagement. We're designing as best we can to make this a viral product, leveraging the avenues that Facebook sort of provides, which I have to say have been kind of clamped down systematically over the past 18 months as they've ramped up their advertising business. There's no longer any real free viral distribution left on Facebook, but nevertheless, it's proven to be really successful for us. Hundreds of thousands of invitations sent by Daily Challenge users to their Facebook friends, lots of those people converting and then becoming friends in the product. We track the R value, which is the reproductive rate, a good indication of viral growth over time. But this is the meat of it here. This graph charts the number of friends I have in the daily challenge along the bottom and the completion rates of challenges along the vertical axis. And the message is really clear. The more friends you have, up to about a dozen, the more successful, dramatically so, you'll be in terms of interacting with the product on a consistent basis. Validating, again, most of our assumptions going into this, that the primary driver of lasting engagement was going to be the social clustering that we were able to foster. We had about 200,000 people sign up for the product so far. A few months ago, we looked at a data set of 150,000 of them to kind of understand better what engagement looks like in the product. And let me quickly run through this. Of the 150,000, about 20% leave after sign up. This is pretty typical of any publicly available web application. It's actually pretty good. And then another 20% chunk, people who are in the product for about 30 days. When you drill into this, there's actually very significant engagement where we engage those people over, on average, 5 or 6 days during a 30-day period, which other research that we've done with other products, namely QuitNet, demonstrates that even that level of interaction can drive efficacy. But most of the folks in the product stay there for 30 days or more, and when you look at that group and break it down, you see a pretty astonishing level of utilization, where people are using the product consistently, not every day, which wasn't our goal, but a few days a week over long periods of time. Plotting that out again, we begin to see people using the product a couple of days a week for a light user, 3 or 4 days a week for a moderate user, 5 or 6 days a week for heavy users over months, setting the stage for us to really begin to analyze, now that we have people engaged, does it have any effect? Before I get to the effectiveness study, want to just sort of come back to the Facebook environment, the broader environment in which we developed this. We go back and for those users who have signed up with their Facebook ID and given us permission to access their social graph, their Facebook list of friends, we then go back and query the Facebook API and amass a huge amount of data. So for 125,000 daily challenge users, we've mapped 35 million of their friends and who have 500 million connections between them. That's the data set that we have, and we can situate our users inside that larger social system, which is we don't know what to do with all that yet, but for the first time we have that kind of data. We have the social relationship data that situates you in your real world networks. This is a social graph that Christakis and his group did with us, looking at a large cluster of 35,000, a large connected cluster of 35,000 daily challenge users. Remember, each of these came in as individuals and then brought their friends and then connected to other people in the product, ending up with the largest connected cluster being 35,000 people. The color coding here falls out from what's called a community detection algorithm that Christakis and his group developed that begins to kind of tease out the definable communities that interact according to this algorithm in ways that predict the level of connection. I have an animation here that I want to show. Get rid of that. So this is that connected cluster. In the middle is the core, with three of the communities being represented by these three different colors. And what I'm going to play here is sort of the end point was the starting point, and we went back through the data set and asked the question, how did these communities come to form? So the animation describes, depicts this community formation. These are daily challenge users who are connecting, creating social connections, friendship connections inside the daily challenge, or inviting their real-world friends to join, and in the process beginning to cluster in clusters that meet this community detection algorithm test. There's one little green dot there that's going to explode here into a whole other community. That's sort of ground zero down there. So this is about if I recall, a 90-day time slice. And there's a lot of data in here. These are not easy kind of representations to develop, and we're still quite some ways away from understanding how to leverage this information. But this is where we're going. These are the kinds of things that we're thinking about. A couple more things here. This is another graph that Christakis and his team helped us with. The blue dots are daily challenge users. The red dots are their Facebook friends. The lines, the red dotted lines or the blue lines, are invitations that daily challenge users have sent out to their Facebook friends. The blue lines are ones that convert to daily challenge members. So this begins to show that the process. There's a lot of invitations that go out. A lot of them are unsuccessful. Part of this has to do with how Facebook now buries a lot of stuff in the news feeds. So this person invited 20, 25, 30 people. Not one of them converted to a member. These were much more successful, and a lot of them were the result of two different daily challenge members inviting, with overlapping social graphs, inviting other people, and those individuals receiving, those targeted people receiving multiple invitations from multiple Daily Challenge members. They converted really well. So we asked ourselves, how can we keep doing that? We had this sort of simple approach initially where we just, here's a list of your Facebook friends, go invite some. Can we do it better? And we mounted a controlled trial where we began to recommend, here's 3 people. And those recommendations were actually driven by a huge amount of data analysis of your Facebook friends and trying to come up with an algorithm that would be better than random. And we did. So these are some of the things that we tested. One is just pick one of your Facebook friends randomly. Another simple approach, let's recommend somebody with a last name, same last name as yours, on the theory that you're related. Or Facebook friends in common, or other friends of yours who have other Daily Challenge users in the system. And these were the preliminary results. We were able to do significantly better than random, and we're still working on this. Part of what we're realizing is that even with the user base that we have, we're not at a level of scale enough to really have the data at hand to work with. So finally, anybody in the healthcare business that wants to sell anything has to prove, fine, if you have all this engagement, so what? Is it effective? Or will it blend? This is my friend Nate, and he's our mad scientist on the team. And one of the things that we did is if you combine the social map of relationships, the social graph with a well-being score, you're going to get the social graph of well-being. And this is the very first social graph of well-being ever produced, where each dot is a Daily Challenge user, connections between them are the real connections inside the product. Drill down here, and you begin to see some surprising things. People are clustering together, and the clusters sort of, are all mixed up. The one in the upper right, people with relatively high well-being. The well-being scores are broken down by 4 different colors, green being the highest quartile, red being the lowest. And so we see, clusters of people with relatively high well-being. In the lower right, relatively low well-being, and in the upper left, people who are, intermingled. We don't know what to make of this yet, but for the first time, we can see how people are interacting in the context of their well-being in a product designed to help them improve their well-being. So the next step for us is we are designing a randomized controlled trial that will enroll 1,200 people, half of them in a control group, the other half into the Daily Challenge, and we'll be looking at outcomes at 30 days and 90 days using the well-being assessment that we've incorporated into the product as the primary outcome. Hopefully we'll be able to show well-being improvement. The preliminary data that we have are very promising, but we need to power this up enough so that we can really detect meaningful differences and then ascribe various actions and activities in the product to success. So an really important aspect of our design and build process is our research capacity to do real scientific research. This is going to be one of the few trials ever entirely conducted off of Facebook. Facebook recruitment will be advertising paid ads on Facebook to drive people to a landing page where they then invited to participate in the Daily Challenge and have an opportunity to be consented into the study and then randomized into one of the 2 groups, and we'll follow them over time and then do phone follow-up, email follow-up, and phone follow-up to try to achieve 70% response rates at the follow-up intervals. So we're excited about that. in closing here, just wanted to mention this idea. We weren't sure when we started MeYou Health. We were asked by the company to really tackle this idea of well-being, and I got to tell you, it was pretty daunting. We weren't even sure that people cared about their well-being. One of the products that we brought to market, the Twitter well-being site that I showed you, was adopted by Deepak, who himself is all about building a well-being movement worldwide. He began tweeting about this to his 720,000 followers, urging them to get their well-being score, and driving people to this site. And you can see when Deepak tweeted, stuff happened. Me close here with another animation that kind of illustrates this in a kind of a neat way. This is the site, and when Deepak started tweeting one day, we saw the activity spiking like crazy. There's an animation here that shows the recent people around the world who have gotten their well-being score. So I'll just play this. So here's somebody in Florida 3 minutes ago. 4 minutes ago, here's somebody in the UK getting their well-being score. These are all people who responded to his tweet. Somebody in the middle of the country, Kansas, looks like, back to the UK. Somebody in Washington State. So we were looking at this, we had this sort of blasted on the big screen in the office, and we were like, my God, people all over the world care about well-being enough to get their well-being score. It's really, we knew then that we were really onto something. We're a long ways from really figuring out how to crack into a mass market for this, but I think that we've made pretty significant effort to date, and got a great team in place to help chase this. So let me stop there. I'll sort of run a little bit over time. If there's enough time to take a few questions, I'm happy to do that. Yes?
How do you manage funding for yourself to keep going if this is free?
We are, a two-part answer to that. We have, everything we've delivered to date has a freely available component. The Daily Challenge is a kind of freemium business model, where there's a whole set of premium services that we're bringing to market that we're now deploying with a number of pilot employer customers, and that'll be the business side of it. In terms of funding, we're a wholly owned subsidiary of Healthways, and we were blessed with a lot of resources over an initial 3-month period to try to get off the ground here with a significant amount of momentum. So I haven't had to raise money yet. Next question. Over here.
I'm going to interpret this. You tell me if I'm interpreting it wrong, but it seems to me that the wellness score, the quantification that results from the interaction, seems to be a very important foundation for both the feedback you're giving the user and what you're listening to in terms of direction. And I know there's a similar quantification that's been done by OECD and a couple of other international organizations to measure the quality of life in different countries and so forth. How important do you think an understanding of what that quantification is on the part of the user is to the sort of the effectiveness and the success of what you're doing?
Good question. I think it's relatively important, but at not in a deep way. I think people are interested in quantifying this because it gives them a handle on something that's pretty nebulous. So people are really attracted to this idea of getting a score and somehow trusting through all the work that's been done with Gallup and Healthways and the teams of scientists that have validated this instrument so that it does statistically predict somebody's well-being, that they're inclined to trust the score. I don't think they need to go in too deep, but it's just a process of interacting with these small daily actions on a daily basis in the context of your friends and loved ones, and you kind of have this score going. We also compute the average score of your friends so that you have a social comparison there. So it's proven to be a really important facet of this, and to be able to couple that and use that as the research kind of benchmarking that we hope we'll eventually find through this controlled study that using this product improves your well-being. And Healthways is doing another body of research that's demonstrating what the effect to an employer, for example, of increasing your well-being is. And it turns out to be huge. If you increase the population of your employee population, if you increase the well-being of your employee population by 2 or 3 points of well-being, the next year you're going to reduce medical claims by 1%. You're going to increase productivity and improvements in absenteeism. And so we're starting to see all these correlations that provide real ROI measures that all tie back statistically to this one well-being measure. So it's proven to be a powerful notion, at the sort of employer and health plan level, the payers, and a powerful idea at the individual level to motivate people around this well-being score. So it's enabled us to kind of glue together the user interaction with the science and with the ROI sort of pitch that we need to make in a business context.
Do you use the same measure of well-being and the same daily challenges for everyone, or is there any customization for someone with high blood pressure, someone with diabetes, someone in a wheelchair, et cetera?
Same measure of well-being, oddly enough. The history of health risk assessments, kind of like, take 100 questions to generate some valid result, and then over time researchers will do the statistical analysis to understand, well, these questions don't really matter, and you kind of like boil it down to smaller and smaller numbers. So currently they've got this down to these 41 questions that don't necessarily seem like all the right ones. For example, we don't ask if you smoke because it doesn't change your well-being score if you smoke or don't smoke. So it's not predictive of well-being. So there's sort of curious things like that kind of fall out of the statistical analysis. It's. What was the first part of your question?
Is there any customization of the daily challenges?
The daily challenges, we started out with a very simple notion, and we have a really agile team. We started with a minimum viable product where we just sent out daily challenges via email, and it's evolved to this point now, but up until recently, the same challenge was sent out to everybody. And the reason for that is that our primary goal was to drive conversations. And by sending out the same challenge to everybody, it gave people something to talk about in common. And the free product operates that way. So the basic track of challenges, it's 365 challenges that are free, and everybody gets them. The commercial part of the product offers choice. We've written another 1,000 challenges that are locked up in what we call 28-day tracks that give people choice, and you can earn enough points and tokens to exchange them for access to one of these tracks, or have your employer buy access for it for you. Sure. Whoever you want.
So your research on engagement and social validation was really good. I'm curious to know, did you find similar things in the Asian and the European market?
We haven't gotten there. We've initially just really been focused on the U.S. market. I can say that Gallup and Healthways have taken the well-being index internationally. The U.K. is adopting it as a national measure. It's also being deployed in Germany. Lots of other countries are interested in it as a framework for defining and measuring well-being. So I think the next 5 years or so will be pretty interesting in that regard.
Hi, question.
Mike, yep.
Have you looked at specific populations, for example, who have chronic behavior problems, and are you finding any problems that are more amenable to a higher gain kind of change in well-being than others?
Good question. We're wrestling with some of this as we design the clinical trial. And some of it has to do with who we're targeting. So we're designing this not necessarily with chronically ill people in mind, where this is all designed to be a lightweight intervention that people we're discovering people with relatively low or moderate sort of well-being scores can benefit from. This is not for somebody who's got a really high well-being score. It's just going to seem too simple and trivial to them. So they kind of, they're the 20% who sign up and go, oh, this is ridiculous, and are out of here. But it's, in a nation where there's, 1/3 of the population is obese, it's not hard to imagine that, there's a lot of people who need some really basic, fundamental, kind of simple support to do the right thing every day. Most of us know what to do. We just can't get ourselves to do the right thing. So that's what this is designed for. And we're starting to understand, where if you have an initial well-being of, 65, what could we expect in terms of well-being improvement, and sort of where those limits are. But these are the kinds of things that we'll be asking ourselves in the course of the clinical trial and the analysis that we do.
Have you found any differences between age groups or other segments on how you should contact them and engage them and this viral marketing?
Again, we're a little bit hampered by how we have sort of designed and distributed the product to date, in that, our initial goal, we built this entirely off the back of, as a Facebook Connect app initially. It was the only way to use the daily challenge for the first year. You couldn't log in without using your Facebook ID. And we advertised on Facebook to drive initial enrollment, and then the sort of viral growth started happening. And for a long time, we didn't even gather, because we didn't want to make it an obstacle, the age information. So we're just starting now to develop a better composite picture, but it looks like we're targeting the folks that we intended. Between 30 and 50-year-olds are the primary audience that we went after, that we designed for, and they're the folks who this seems to appeal to. Skewed pretty heavily initially to women, about 85% female. And if you remember the Pew Internet stats, the lion's share of social application users are women, and it was certainly true with QuitNet from the start. So we're just starting to understand those patterns. Don't have a good handle on them yet, but I think it'll be important that women are going to be really important as sort of channels to get the men in their lives engaged, and we think we'll be more successful. It's really expensive to buy Facebook ads and targeting men to convert into members into this thing. We're much more successful in encouraging the female users we have to invite the men in their lives and encourage them or coerce them into joining. Reward them.
We have time for one or two more questions.
Is there a reason why you limited it to just friends you're connected to on Facebook, or is there ways of forming friendships or groups through the application? Given how Weight Watchers or AA have proven with like-minded goals, you can form friendships around to accomplish goals, or how people are developing relationships online. I just question why it has to be forced to Facebook friends.
It's not. That's where we started. Again, in a world where we're doing product builds every week or every 2 weeks, you got to start someplace. And, going back to some of these other ideas, our explicit intention was to begin to understand how your connections to the real people in your life influence you. And so that's very much what we wanted to test. Now we've expanded the product so that you can enroll just with an email address and a password. You can connect with, create friendship connections with people you meet inside the Daily Challenge. And we'll be sort of teasing that out. As a friend that you met online, do they have as much influence on you as somebody in your real life? Again, sort of going back to the quantification of influence that Christakis and his colleagues have investigated. Who has the mic?
We'll take one last public question, and then you're all invited to join us for Mad Pow Cake, and Chris will be there, and you can continue to ask your questions.
All right. Okay. This may overlap a little bit with some of the other things that were asked, but I was going through the Twitter well-being app in the audience, and I noticed some of the questions had to do with people's socioeconomic status, like were there certain times where they could or could not afford things like insurance. And I wonder, have you looked at how socioeconomic status, either temporarily or more sort of permanently, has impacted some of these results, or do you find that this is targeted more towards a particular audience? Since you have like iPhone apps and the like?
Well, right now we haven't been targeting anybody. We're just like trying to build an audience. But the socioeconomic questions in the well-being assessment are very much part of how Gallup and Healthways have developed the instrument to begin with, recognizing that it's really important in people's perspective and outlook. And in fact, if you look at some of the trend data at the Gallup-Healthways Wellbeing Index, you'll see tremendous fluctuation when the economy's bad, and people are feeling it. So it's a major driver, and the index recognizes that, and it's incorporated in the personal well-being score as well. A lot of these things, we just don't have answers to these questions yet. And that, from a design perspective, we knew we wouldn't have the capacity to answer any of these questions if we couldn't figure out how to engage an audience in these kinds of activities. So that was our obsession for 2 years. Can we build applications around this well-being idea that anyone will use, or invite their friends to use and use with them? So that was sort of step one, is just getting a significant level of engagement that would allow us to move forward and bring some of this to market, as well as get the research done that hopefully will show this actually works. So thank you very much. Look forward to